Welcome back to another episode of EVObsession. There is nothing more effective to get Zachary Shahan to be quiet than recording in progress. So, Zachary, welcome. This is our first show after Labor Day, and I don't know, man. I feel relaxed and rested. How are you?
Yeah, no, but it is a good day to
Less
do another.
relaxed and relaxed and rested.
My wife has had COVID, and I've been doing mommy duty and daddy duty, and it's a lot of work. So not rested at all. And we have our first soccer practice of the season today. I'm coaching both daughters' teams one afternoon. It'll be a good Tuesday. But
Let's get
yeah,
right to it. Obviously, a lot of the American manufacturers, North American manufacturers, probably going to have a quiet weekend, enjoying their own Labor Day weekend. But that is not the case over in Europe. BMW at the end of last week brought out their Vision Neue Klasse. They're saying that this is what future BMWs will look like. It's a little more angular, a little more edgier, I think, styling language than what we've seen in the past. And BMW likes to do this, don't they? They bring out a concept car that kind of gives out the stylistic themes that they're going to be working with over the next couple of years. And this is their first attempt at doing this, I think, in the 2020s. But what I find really interesting about this is the interior. It is the most minimalistic, sparse, nothing to it interior I've seen. And like it just feels like a Tesla.
well, I mean, look, I love the vehicle, but concept vehicles drive me nuts because it's so obviously not gonna happen. I mean, there's like you're like, what percentage of this is gonna be in a production vehicle? Like 10%, obviously not the craziest stuff. Like the craziest thing is the central display that's a trapezoid. And it just makes you feel like your eyes are warped and you're dizzy and you're like, who thought that was a fun idea? I mean, and it's the most obvious thing that's never going to be in the production vehicle because it looks bonkers. And this is BMW, not Quirk Mobile Limited. Like,
Quirk Mobile. I think it'll be so. This is funny that you say that because I see this as being okay. Future BMWs are going to have a trapezoidal display. They're going to have a square screen in the middle of it, and then they'll have some pads on the outside that you'll be able to touch, effectively buttons that you'll be able to touch and give it that trapezoid shape. But I get it
but did you
completely.
look at the picture? The picture has your like,
It's
oh,
so
it's like
weird.
warped. I mean, maybe
Yeah.
that's what they plan, but the way it's like the designers are like, okay, let's just like warp this image to the and it looks like ridiculous.
Yeah. I think
But I
to
do.
me, the takeaway here is that BMW is going to get rid of that central tunnel. They're playing with that idea of getting rid of what used to be a transmission tunnel and just having it more open, which I think is very Tesla like. I think they're playing with the square steering wheel angle, which is, more like the yoke of the Tesla, even though it's not a yoke, it kind of plays into that. And I think just the minimalism, right? Can BMW get away with effectively copying Tesla this much? Will the BMW dealers, will the BMW fans accept this? Or will they call it out for what it is, which to me is just a copy of the Tesla Model 3?
Yeah, well, so let's talk about each of these elements and just let's just try to distinguish, and I'm going to rely on you a little bit more for this, but I will also chime in, what we think is going to be potentially in a production BMW EV and what is just not. But yeah, let's start with it's an interesting thing that you catch the lack of a tunnel. So there's no divider between the driver's foot area and the passenger's foot area, which I find really interesting and like appealing. But then as I was starting to talk about it, I'm like, that's obviously not safe. Like, like what if the passenger decides to stretch their legs out, or they kick something over there from their passenger side foot area? Like, there's no protection for the pedals. So, I mean, as interesting as it looks, maybe they could do something with a little divider, a low divider. I don't know, but I don't see any production car having an open floor area between the where the passenger can just immediately decide to step on the go pedal if they want.
You think they might do something like what's in the Model S, where there's like that cargo shelf where you can, put your
Right. The
purse
original
or
Model
lunch
S
bag or
had
whatever?
the original Model S didn't have the one behind me in this picture. It didn't have a center console, and we got an aftermarket center console from Avionics. But well, there's also what is the Honda Clarity has. Well, it's not really like there's not a lot of space there, but it's got a little. I don't know, but there's different. There are mm, some attempts at like innovating or jazzing up the center area. So I mean, I could see them, but again, I think what you said is probably accurate. They're probably trying to how can we out minimalism? How can we out minimalize Tesla? I was like, let's just get rid of this foot area, this divider in the foot area.
Yeah.
Um, but
It reminds me
I
of
mean,
the old school 1970s BMW 2002s, um, that they had less going on in there. I mean, they did still have a center console, but you could kind of see your way around it. Um, and I think this is going to be kind of part of that, right? Where we're going back into this idea of form follows function. And if there's no reason to have it there, if there's no reason to have that transmission tunnel because there's no transmission, why have anything there at all? And it's interesting, right? Because if you look at Polestar and Volvo, they go the other way. They do not build their EVs on a skateboard chassis. They build them on a backbone chassis, and the batteries run in a vertical stack through that tunnel through the center of the vehicle, because they're designing them for safety and getting them away from side impacts. But again, totally different philosophy, but similar outcomes.
yeah, I really like the look of. I love the exterior. Uh, Steve, when writing about it, had a sort of funny statement on that. I'll see if I can find it later. But then again, well, let's come back to the exterior. So we're still on this interior. They have a head-up display that goes across the windshield. So it's not just for the driver, but also the passenger, which I find interesting. I don't know. Do you have any
I like
thoughts on
that. I
that?
like the idea of, because you do want to be able to have information displayed, um, to everyone involved, especially like if it's audio information or HVAC information. And by putting that into the heads up display and having it wrap all the way around, I think it accomplishes two things. I think first, it makes it easier to go from a left hand drive market to a right hand drive market. Same with the trapezoid, they can just kind of flip that screen and it'll do it. And I think the other aspect of that is you can now add complexity, systemic complexity, to the HVAC controls, to the audio video controls, and still enable that to be the passenger's job. I mean, that was always, whenever we did road trips in college, you were the driver, your job was to drive. If you were the right front passenger, you were on DJ duty. Your job was to, change the CDs and pick good music. And you can still do that even though there is no physical media.
Yeah, DJ Duty is good and fun. Well,
It is.
the, this the the steering wheel. I like the steering wheel quite a lot. I'm not a fan of the yoke, and but I like this one. It looks a little big, but also one of the issues with the yoke that has popped up is there's a lot of wear and tear around the corners because wheels just work well because they're special.
They're
So when
special,
you're
yeah.
when you're turning and then you're letting the wheel slide, there's not so much friction with the corners. Basically, instead of a perfect wheel, you get more extra friction in certain spots, and there's wear and tear. And
Yeah.
so I could see the same thing happening with BMWs with this, but it seems like it would happen less. It
Well,
just
in fairness,
looks like it would work better.
BMW's material quality,
I was waiting for that. I
it
was waiting.
seems to be
I was
higher in the sense that, and I don't necessarily think this is a Tesla issue. I think this is an issue with anything that's kind of built this way. BMW just has a lot of experience building high quality steering wheels. They're known in the industry for having some of the best steering wheels. If you're looking at a track car or a car that you're going to drive very aggressively, which for many years was BMW's whole thing, right? They were the ultimate driving machine. they put a lot of science and study and money into developing steering wheels that last and that feel good in people's hands. And I think that that will maintain even as they change the shape. Now, what we're looking at here in the concept, is that realistic? Is that going to last? No, that's like a thin skin of Alcantara that maybe is, wrapped around a clay piece. It's not real. It's all fantasy in Hollywood, and that's great. But I think if it makes it into production, BMW is not going to make some of those same mistakes. They'll put something in there that's gonna work.
But if they jazzed up the steering wheel a bit with something a bit like this, I think that would be appealing.
Totally agree. I really like that. I really like the headlights and the grill.
Yeah, let's jump to we'll tackle the exterior now. Yeah.
Yeah, I really like the headlights and the grill. One of the big questions that we've talked about, especially when we were doing the bracket challenge, which we still need to finish up, by the way, we talked about the BMW i7 versus the Mercedes-Benz EQS and what they were doing with the grill to make it still look like vehicles from the past that could still be recognizable as BMW and Mercedes, now that we were in a place where we didn't need that grill to cool the vehicle. And I really like what they did with this in the sense that it's kind of animated. It looks like a grill, but it also has kind of like a sci-fi computer vibe to it. You can't really say that it's echoing or aping or copying a grill. And the whole thing is illuminated and lights up and puts on a show. I really think it's a neat way to incorporate that sort of traditional BMW double kidney shape into something that is modern and electrified without it looking like, oh, they just did a plastic cover to make it look like a grill.
Yeah, no, I mean, some of the recent grills have been infamous for how bad they look. I mean, the beaver grills have,
Nose cone.
yeah, but this is a really it's a really interesting. I mean, I would be curious to see how much of this would get into production vehicle. But as Steve described it, he said the company's trademark twin kidney grill is now horizontal, not vertical, and incorporates the headlights as well. So that's an interesting, point too. It's actually like it's more than a grill has ever been for BMW with the headlights incorporated. It looks weird, like you're looking into something, like it's like an optical illusion, it seems like, from the front.
Yeah.
But just to read this, that's Steve Hanley's article on CleanTechnica.com, just to make sure people know who I'm talking about with Steve. But yeah, it's an interesting. I like it. I think it looks fun and sporty and futuristic. I would actually, I feel like I might even like a production version more because it's a little bit weird, a little bit too wonky, like that trapezoidal touchscreen. Whereas I feel like a production version would be a little bit more tied
A
to the
little more
real world.
polished.
Yeah, and more polished.
Yeah. And I
so
think
also,
yeah, go ahead.
well, also on the exterior, one of the funny comments from Steve's article was there are no creases and crinkles in the sheet metal, no character lines pressed into the skin that start in random locations and then crash into themselves along the flanks of a vehicle. Even Tesla has fallen victim to this silliness in some of its models. I think this is a case of it being a concept vehicle, and those are important for aerodynamics, and that they will be there won't be such a. I mean, I like how it looks, but I don't mind those kind of. I mean, when I see them, I just think aerodynamics. Those are for aerodynamics.
Well, I think that there's two parts to that, right? Because BMW famously invented what they called flame surfacing in the late 90s, early 2000s. There was a designer called Chris Bangle that did that. And they were putting creases in the bodywork specifically to create areas of high and low light and give the impression of movement, even though the vehicle was standing still, just based on the way that light traveled across it. And love it or hate it, it has defined BMW styling for the last 20 years. And this vehicle going so far away from that, I think is going back to what I would say is more traditionalist BMW, like the E30 325. I had an E30 325 with the 2.7 motor, the 2002 era before that. And I think BMW is looking towards that late 70s, 80s into the early 90s, that kind of 1980s yuppie era BMW as the real high point when they had a brand that they could point back to. And this conversation gets back to branding again, that they could point to and say, that is a BMW and that's what a BMW looks like. And I think that this is getting back to that simplicity and that pure driving experience. And to Steve's point, it does feel like some of these lines are random. And if you're a CAD designer, if you understand how some of these software systems work, you can look at some of these car designs and say, that is the way it is because of this quirk of the CAD system they were using. And if you look at this vehicle, this BMW Neue Klasse, it looks like it was a clay model first, and then they made one. It looks like something somebody handcrafted, somebody hand polished. And if you look at the character line, the shut lines around the hood go perfectly into a body line on the side glass, and then it gets picked up again towards the back of the vehicle and becomes a spoiler. Now, the masters of this, the absolute masters of this, are Lucid. The guys at Lucid have picked this up so perfectly, and they understand this so great that you can pick up a reflection line at the front corner marker and carry it all the way to the back of the car. And it looks like the 5 or 6 people on earth who noticed that and appreciated that, among them was a BMW stylist, and they are taking this to the next level. And I just couldn't be more excited. This is exactly the kind of thing that I geek out about. This is exactly the kind of attention to detail that excites me. Even if you look at the one crease on the side of the car, it lines up perfectly with the spokes of the wheel, so that when the wheel is a certain way, it lines up visually just right. And man, they did a good job with this. And it's those little details that, even if you say, yeah, it's a very bland, boring kind of shape, it's those little tiny details that bring it all together and kind of make it cohere into something that, is basically a car geek can geek out about and get excited about.
Yeah, I'll come back to Lucid in a second, but the line that you first referred to, the hood line crease that goes into this black stripe on the windows, I think that looks really cool, where it turns into the black stripe on the windows. I really like that. But the first thought when I look at this car is, it looks sort of like just something in a computer game, a video game. It's so sort of, flat and yeah, sort of, simplistic in that way. And the other thing I thought was, it looks like an old vehicle. Like, although it's very futuristic in elements, other elements make me think maybe the yellow seating as
The
well.
yellow's doing it.
The yellow
It
interior.
looks like a
Like an older
BMW.
vehicle.
Yeah, it looks like the BMW that Tron would drive in like the 1985 movie.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And on the Lucid topic of Lucid, I mean, that's again, when I see a Lucid Air in the real world. Oh, what's going on there?
Nothing.
When I see a Lucid Air in the real world, to me, it looks a bit flat and old. Like, it makes me think of an old Buick or something. Which
Oh,
I love Lucid in most respects, but it's a bit too flat, and like just seems old in its design in certain ways. And there's an element of that with and I guess it's all those squiggly creases or something as part of it that I'm used to seeing in cars. But and then you look at older cars and just like a flat panel. But overall, I would just say my first impression with the BMW Neue Klasse concept is that I think it's really cool looking. Although I also, with the Lucid Air, I think it looks cooler in pictures online than in person. This is my issue with it. Like, I always think it looks cool in pictures, and then I see it in the real world, I'm like, it doesn't look as cool as I thought it looked, And I'm just I still love the vehicle, but I mean, that's my main criticism of it.
Everything that any critic has ever thrown at Lucid can be explained by, they have an engineer making the final decision. If Henrik Fisker was running that company, he never would have allowed the car to get built before seeing a full-size clay model and walking around it 45 different times in 22 different lighting and 16 different colors before saying, yeah, this looks good. This is a company that's driven by engineering and driven by an engineer. And you see that when you say, wow, this looks amazing on a monitor at this scale and this angle and this lighting, which is probably what they used in their CAD rendering, and it falls a little flat in real life. I'm sure they skipped that step. I'm sure there was someone in there who said, well, we can see what it looks like in the CAD. It's not going to look any different as a big model. It's why go through that cost and inefficiency, right? Because they're, again, engineers. They're all about efficiency. They skipped a crucial step there. You know, I want to bring this up too.
And Henry Fisker is the master of those squiggly lines. And if you didn't watch our last episode or the one before it, which one did we talk about? The Fisker pair.
They're all the same. It all just blurs into one conversation.
Make sure to watch or listen to those, because those were some fun discussions.
You need to spend 16 hours listening to this, no matter what episode we're on, because we are bringing it to you the way that others probably can, but don't.
This is the real, I can't use that word, but this is the real this is the real stuff. We're not holding back, and we're calling it how it is. And we have the eyes of an automotive genius. That's Joe Boris.
I was going to say, and Zachary's here too.
Just a general genius.
Zachary's here. 2 seconds later.
Okay. All right, let's move on.
But before we move on, I want to say, so David Waterworth blows my mind, because like I'll read 3 or 4. I really actually do read CleanTechnica, right? Like I'm a reader, I'm part of it. I read the articles, and David Waterworth blows my mind, because he'll write 3 or 4 articles in a row that I just go, what the heck did I just read? Like, what is he on holiday? He's like, this is like he's giving me a summary of where he went to lunch. This guy's driving me insane. And then he'll write something or say something that's like so intuitive and so like just like piercing through the veils of corporate BS that I'm like, I'm going to have to read 6 more of this guy's mind-numbing holiday articles, because I need this next nugget of information, right? And he had a really good point about how much is the German auto industry genuinely threatened by Chinese EVs. And I look at the BMW Neue Klasse and I think to myself, it's not just the Chinese EVs that are threatening them. It is Tesla. And I think about this all the time, that BMW and Mercedes-Benz both, since the 1990s, have been diluting their brand. They've been adding new models and they've been adding new segments, where at one point it seemed like BMW and Mercedes were trying to occupy every niche in the automotive industry, whether it was like a 4-door high wheelbase sedan sports car, or like a little coupe, or like a small 2-door hatchback wagon convertible. Like if you could name some ridiculous type of modern day Pontiac Aztek, there's probably a BMW or Mercedes equivalent to any ridiculous vehicle niche you could think of. But 25 years ago, Mercedes-Benz was about the S-Class and BMW was about the 3 Series. And if you look at Tesla's brand, they only really have 2 sedans. They only really have 2 cars. And I don't think it's a coincidence that they're called Model S and Model 3, because they go and strike at the heart of exactly what those vehicles used to represent and used to be. They're still a little bit exclusive. They still feel a little bit special in a way that, frankly, BMWs and Mercedes don't to a lot of people. There are so many BMW and Mercedes out there today in my neighborhood driving around Chicago. They don't seem special, where every 4th car I drive past is a Model Y, but the Model S still seems a little bit special, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, no, that's a great point. And yeah, I mean, we'll just say some years ago when I was in college, I dreamt of getting
It's just been so long.
I remember, I can picture myself in my first college apartment, like outside the dorms, like scrolling the BMW website and the Audi website and looking at which ones I liked and wanted. And
you could configure them and like, I want the blue, this interior. Absolutely.
No, it feels like yesterday, which is sad. But the point is, they had that kind of back then, and now I don't think they really do have that much. I mean, they have remnants of it. There's a residue, but yeah, I agree. It's sort of just like another car, and it's a good point with the S. The S does have that, like, whoa, look at that. Sort of like an Aston Martin or something. You would
don't get excited here.
Okay, well,
there is no way that you're going to pull up in an Aston Martin and have someone go, "Is that the new Tesla?" No.
No, I'm just saying it's got to look, and it's like, oh wow, look at that. And Yeah, well, it's an interesting feedback first on David's articles because I struggle with that business as an editor. And so I think we should maybe have brand a series as sort of like EV life, because a big those other sort of like how is it living with EVs and talking to people in the EV
Yes.
community, particularly in Australia. And we used to do that more in the US, and I think we sort of like, oh, everybody,
It's
they're
hard
main,
to do when
but
30%
we
of
don't
all
do
new
it.
sedans are electric.
Yeah, and now a lot of our writers have EVs, but we don't do any more of these like long-term EV articles. But David's still doing them, so maybe we should give that kind of category, EV life kind of
Yeah.
category, and
EVs down under.
that way if yeah, EVs down under. That way I don't want to read another article about
But
EV
you
life
have to, because
down.
that's where he hides the nuggets of wisdom.
Well, I
It's like
mean,
when you get
or some
onto
people might
these.
only want to read those and they don't care about the other stuff. But
That's true.
yeah,
That's true.
but those bigger industry like they bubble up, I think, for him, and then all of a sudden, boom. So he's got this one that you referenced. How much is the German auto industry under threat? And there's one today. I didn't change the title, and I was wondering if the title works for what it is.
Oh, the
But
Toyota one.
good news for Toyota, and then he's sort of just like, oh, good news, Toyota's selling a lot of these electric vehicles in a couple of countries, and then he's like, what is Toyota doing wrong? Like, this destroys Toyota, like, for its kind of its EV approach, and he's had a few of these on Toyota. He's really, I mean, as he says in the article, he would like Toyota to go electric seriously, and he thinks that the best way to have a fast EV transition is to for all automakers to do it seriously. But Toyota is an interesting case. Anyway, we're not going to talk about that story today, but you can read the good news for Toyota story as well. But it's the same this kind of complacency that some of these big players have. They're like, oh, Toyota's like, oh yeah, we're the number one automaker. We'll take our time. We'll do it when we feel ready. And BMW sort of was like that in the premium class, luxury class, BMW and Mercedes. I mean, they ruled this luxury class market for ages, and they're just like, we control the market. We'll do what we want when we want, and we'll shape the future. And then Tesla came in and sort of just totally disrupted their market, but they're actually still doing fine. It's not like they've lost. It's not well. I mean,
They
depends on how
have.
far back. Depends on
You're
how far back you look.
Well, no,
I
no, no.
really
Hang
long
on. I want to be clear. And I want to say that, yes, Mercedes Benz, BMW, they are showing record numbers. They have shown significant growth in terms of market share, but they're what used to be their core business of sedans and luxury vehicles, they're way, way down. What has
but it also just
happened
comes okay. But I mean, it's the vehicle class. I mean, what we talked about last
It's
time with
not that,
Ford.
it's the price. If you look at the average US transaction price of $48,000, which is the average transaction price for a new vehicle, these car companies, BMW, Mercedes Benz, and Audi, they have plenty of vehicles that you can buy at that price. If you go back to the mid 80s or the mid 90s, when the average transaction price was 19,000 or 22,000, they did not have any offerings at that price. They were a premium priced brand. Now, you can argue and say that anything that costs $50,000 should be considered premium or whatever you want to say. But the reality is, these vehicles that used to be premium luxury exotic vehicles now have plenty of options, plenty of entry level options that are well under the average transaction price for a new vehicle in the US. So that means, by definition, if you're selling at the average price, then you're no longer a luxury product. You're selling at the average price. They are now an average priced new car brand.
And I don't know if we want to go down this road, but I mean, in the case of Toyota and Honda, they've got Lexus and Acura. Do you think BMW should have just said, "Hey, we're going to create a budget BMW brand"?
They did. It's called Mini.
But Mini's not. Mini's. I mean, these are a lot of money for what you get. I mean, this is just a special vehicle. It's not like really a budget brand. It's not like a mass market budget brand. These are small vehicles.
Sure.
I don't know.
Well, but you bring up an interesting point, right? Because Volkswagen has Audi, right? An Audi is not an Audi is an expensive Volkswagen. An Acura is an expensive Honda. A Lexus is an expensive Toyota. there is no cheap Mercedes Benz. There is a cheap Mercedes Benz. There's plenty of cheap Mercedes Benz, but they are all labeled and badged as Mercedes Benz. BMW, you could argue, and I think I would argue that Mini Cooper was meant to be that. I think they had a lot of hopes for Mini being a sort of new age Honda Civic hatchback like it was in the 80s, and they had initially hoped to sell many, many tens of thousands more than they did, and that they've been forced to move up market a little bit. But that shouldn't change the fact that that was the intent. They didn't succeed, but I think that was
Okay.
the intent.
I buy you. I think that sounds right.
Thank
No,
you.
it's just I just think of it now as this, sort of limited volume, high market, high class, but small, brand. But yeah, that makes a lot more sense, what you said. And I have driven, I mean, I've rented like Mercedes A class and BMW 2 Series. Man,
Yeah,
these are not the best
they're okay.
vehicles. And you're like, oh, it's got a BMW and Mercedes badge. It looks sort of fancy, but then you drive it and you're like, oh,
There's nothing special. Well,
it's not
I
great.
used to tell people, there was a lot of in the performance car world and the tuner world and drag racing world, there was a lot of, I would say, sadness when Mitsubishi said they were going to stop making the Evo for the US. And I had to remind people, I'm like, no, 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 you don't understand. Mitsubishi is part of this Daimler association with Mercedes Benz. Mercedes owns a big piece of this. They're going to bring this out as like an entry level Mercedes, and it's going to be just like the entry level AMG. And sure as you know what, the CLA 45 came out with all wheel drive, 2 liter, that same Haldex all wheel drive type system that the Mitsubishi had, that same longitudinal, transverse engine setup. I mean, it was basically an Evo 11, but it had a Mercedes badge on it so they could charge $10,000 more. And it had the same janky plastic and the same fake vinyl interior that they called Leatherette or MB Tex or whatever it was. And, it to me, to my way of thinking and feeling, it diluted the brand. Not only diluted the Mercedes brands, but diluted the AMG brand. But on the flip side, from a business case, if I'm Daimler and I say, look, I can sell this Mitsubishi for 40 grand, or I can put a Mercedes badge on the nose and sell it for 55, I'm going to sell it for 55 all day long.
Campers?
Did you say ampers? Like
Campers.
Pampers?
We're gonna switch to the campers.
Oh, the campers.
I
I
think we
think
beat
this is a
BMW
great
and
thing.
Mercedes to death here.
They had it coming. Freaking
Let's
Nazis.
jump to the next topic, which
Nazi
is
sympathizers.
electric travel trailers and camper vehicles.
I get so I have this like interesting role at CleanTechnica now, right? Where I effectively get all the emails that come in, and I have to look at it and I have to decide, is this news in the sense that X thing happened and something that we are obligated to write about, or is this promotion? Is this an advertisement, and this should go down the business world, right? So I have this like kind of gatekeepery function. So I get everything. I get all the emails.
And
And
let's just say you love having that control.
oh,
This is
absolutely. There is no,
this
I
is
have never been happier. I think
Joe's like,
like, yeah, no,
oh,
that's right.
control. I love control.
That's right. And the company's never been better. So anyway, absolutely.
No, I
Just
would just
send
say,
me.
no, aside from having fun with it, look, you're the person. You're an ideal person for this role. You're really. I mean, we have other people do the role as well, but a couple other people do it in various ways. But I mean, Joe, you've been in these industries for ages. You can separate the BS from the, hey, this is really interesting news, as well as anybody. So really good
I
work, and
appreciate that. I
kudos
appreciate
to you.
that. And so in that role, I get about, and it's the last 6 7 months, I think, and I'm not exaggerating, I think it's at least two a month, at least, of some new company that is building the quote unquote Tesla of RVs. And it's always a very similar thing. It's a very high end, very expensive travel trailer that has a whole bunch of batteries in it, maybe a solar panel on there. And they want like $250,000 to $500,000 for this thing. And I do not get it.
Yeah, well, first of all, I just want to at. We do not push through sponsorship anything we think is BS. Like, so we have, you know, a few categories. Something is like, oh, this has got to be covered today. This is big news. We've got, oh, this is interesting, but no one's gonna probably pick it up. It's useful, it's good. Let's work with them, see what we can do. And then we've got like, oh, this is trash, delete, you know. So a lot of
There's
stuff
a
is
lot
just
of that.
goes to the trash. But so it's not a case of, oh, this is crap, let's sell it, you know.
No, but
No,
can
so
you really think of a scenario where $300,000 for a travel trailer makes sense?
yeah, well, so this is the thing. We've seen some of these, and some of them is really hard to find the price, and you're like, wow, this is really
Yeah.
cool. I really
Do
want
we
this.
want
And
to
you find it
name
price, and it's
names?
like
Do we want to
two
name
hundred
drop these
fifty
guys?
thousand dollars. Like, are you crazy? I can't afford that. But yeah. So I mean, I don't know. Some people have so much money that they can do whatever they want with it. So I don't know how much of a market. I mean, frankly, I'm shocked at the vehicles I see in my area all the time. I'm like, where do people get all this money? But with this trailer story, there's the one that you highlighted for the show today from Lightship. I'll let you talk about it more. But the thing that struck me, aside from, like, at first I was like, from Tesla, what? It's like, this is a self-propelled battery-powered travel trailer from Tesla and other auto tech alums. I was like, from, you know, for a
Yeah.
second. But
Well,
it is, you know,
that's
you always
another
got,
thing.
when
You
one of
know,
the founders is from Tesla, it's like you always have to have that there because people pay attention. But the thing that struck me right away was the starting price of 125,000 or 118,400 after the tax credit. That's pretty much the lowest I've seen for a good clean tech travel trailer. I don't know. What can you say about it? I mean, it's still way too much money for me. I mean,
but
I'm
what
like,
makes it a
10 grand
clean
would
tech
be
travel trailer? Like, so let's get one thing straight. None of these, none of these travel trailers or fifth wheel haulers or pop up tent campers, none of them have motors, right? So we're not increasing their miles per gallon or removing their fossil fuel emissions. What many of them have is generators. But I don't know if you've ever had a lot of experience RVing. I full-time RV'd for about 3 years back in the late 90s, early 2000s until my son was born, my oldest son. And I got to tell you, there was like zero use of the generator because you get to your campground and you plug in. And when you get to a campground at a major national park or, a theme park or basically someplace you want to go, you can plug in there. It's only very, very few people who are truly way, way off the grid and running on their generators. And for them, so many of these vehicles now come with solar panels or have solar panels available that just about everything, whether it's a Jayco or a travel light or an Airstream, almost all of them could be argued as being clean tech travel trailers, and they don't cost $350,000. So I don't understand what it is. And you could get into it and say, you can get into the concept, like I like to say when we talk about Teslas versus other cars, that in many ways quality is ethereal, that it's not just a spec sheet thing. But I don't even see that here. I think a lot of the Tetons and the Bluebirds of the world, they have interiors that are as nice as or nicer than most of the homes or hotels or condos that you can get into. I don't see there being a 3x value jump by going to something and just calling it green and efficient and whatever else. And I don't know if they're just sitting here trying to sell 5 of these things to some of the rich people at Burning Man, but like, I just can't understand it. I would argue that any vehicle, regardless of what it burns for fuel, that gets you out into nature and helps you become more appreciative of the world that you live on and inspire you to protect it and preserve it, is a green vehicle. This ain't it.
Yeah, well, it's not my wheelhouse. It's an interesting rant you had there. I had a thought in the
Should
middle, but then
rename this Joe
I
Rants
forgot
at
it
Zachary
right
for
at the
20
end.
minutes.
But I mean, there are some that are not trailers, but that you drive. There was one
There are
really
some electric motorhomes.
there
Yes.
was one really appealing one, and I was like, it took me forever to find the price on it, and then the price was like 250 or $350,000 something. I was like, what? It's like, well, that looks really cool. I know what I was. Yeah. So I think the only way to really judge like how clean tech and great it is, if we get a review model for like a year or so, then we can then we can really judge it accurately and with a totally unbiased opinion. No,
I got to tell you, you
I don't
put
know.
Jennifer Sensiba or
Oh,
Derek Markham in one of these for 6 months and see what he
oh,
said. I mean, Derek is the perfect guy. He's out there living the dream. He's doing, cowboy stuff out in New Mexico.
or Jennifer. I mean, she's the one who does a lot of traveling.
These are
Derek,
too fancy for her though. I feel like the first thing she would say is like, who needs a refrigerator when you're out in the wilderness? Kill what you eat. you know, and I think she's a vegan too. So like, I don't think it's that sensitive.
really, I didn't know that.
I'm making this up as I go
Okay?
along.
You're
I have
making
no
stuff
idea.
up. I
I'll
don't think
text her
she.
and ask her.
I don't think she. I think the first is more likely. The kill what you eat mentality is probably. I feel like that's more. We have to
I
make
love
sure
her.
we're going to make listeners out of all of our writers now because we're talking about them. David, Steve, Jennifer, we're going to listen to this show because we're
No, but the
talking.
reality is that CleanTechnica has so many different personalities. And one of the things that I love about our website is when you go to another website, right? Let's just say there's some random e-vehicle journey website, right? They all kind of have a similar voice. And there's like the voice of the magazine, right? We definitely do not have that. If all you read of CleanTechnica was Jennifer Sensiba, you would have a very different sense of it than if all you read was Zachary Shahan, or if all you read was David Waterworth, or if all you read was Tina Casey. Like it's a very different vibe. And to bring all of those different perspectives into the one place, I think is what makes it valuable.
Yeah, no, I've always been very big on letting people have the voice they have and sort of letting people have freedom to cover what they want. Because I'm just one of sort of traditional academic minded kind of like the more opinions, the better, the more let's have a diverse, lively discussion. And I mean, to the point of, oh, this is total BS. This can't be on here. I
Right.
give,
This is
I give
nonsense.
writers
You got to
feedback.
go.
Even that is like, I'm like, well, maybe it's BS. Maybe I'm just wrong. But no, but I think, yeah, I like that too. And we especially have a very global
We
writing
do.
team.
We have
So we have
writers in Africa, writers in Asia, writers in Australia. It's fantastic.
America. Yeah.
So if you're listening to this, I know we're getting to the end of our time commitment. I got a bunch of stuff to do because we're getting close to Q4, which means that I am updating the CleanTechnica e-bike buyer's guide for 2023. That's going to be really exciting. I've got a call on that next with some e-bike brands that are going to be helping us out with that. Speaking of which, a couple things we didn't get to cover. InMotion has an off-road electric unicycle. We'll put that up in the next couple days. Jackrabbit has a new tiny little e-bike thing that now comes with dual batteries. You can get about 40-50 miles of range out of that thing, which just basically turns it into a second car. That's awesome for them. And then New, who is a Chinese company. Actually, I really like this company because they have a great app. And that's something that cannot be understated. If you have an e-mobility solution that has an app, if it's a bad app, it will ruin your product. And there's so many companies out there that do have an app that is like mediocre or bad. I think New absolutely gets it. I can lock my scooters and my bikes. I can set speed limiters from my vehicle or from my app. I've got, my kid in college has one of these new kick scooters that I reviewed, and it goes 25 miles an hour. And like, if he's on that thing at 3 a.m. and I look down and see that, I can throttle that down to 15 miles an hour, make sure he doesn't totally kill himself. So I
Yeah.
love that.
And New has been a dominant player in this industry for
They're
years
so
now.
huge.
I remember interviewing. Yeah, go ahead.
I talked to their guy, Joe Constantine, who's just like a really great interview. And I made the joke. I was like, yeah, you guys make, Tesla's getting all these headlines with their new electric, their new e-Tesla, whatever it's called. And, that's a great bike. But, you guys make more of those in a month than they make in a year. And he goes, I probably make more of those in a day than they make in a year. There are millions of these things out on the roads. And when you start really doing the math, you start to feel like you're, insignificant third rate country that only has like 11,000 two-wheelers
Yeah,
sold a month
no,
or something.
they're big. Yeah. And
They're
they
so
just
huge.
really good products. So
Yeah, they
Yeah.
have really great stuff. And well, now that we've plugged them, we should try to get them to sponsor us at some point. But that's
That's
what
a
I've got for
meta
today, man.
comment.
Yeah, better go. That's
But
what I've got for today. Um,
yeah,
I think we should try for next week. I know we're going to have a lot more automotive news, but I think we should try for
Friday.
next week to try to work in some motorsport stuff because there is some really exciting stuff happening in the world of electric offshore racing, as well as electric car racing, electric rallying that I want to start talking about. And I think it's going to be really exciting stuff.
We can give motorsports 5 minutes on the Friday
5 minutes on a Friday
show.
show. I think that's plenty.
We'll give it a little time. Yeah.
We'll give it a little something, something.
Only if we can also talk about tennis for half an hour. I'm just kidding.
I think we should.
Yeah,
I
no.
think we should. I was watching the US Open and I kept seeing ads for the Kia EV6. I was so excited.
Oh, look at that. We have an angle. Let's do it.
That's our
All
show
right.
for today. We'll see you Friday.